What's up everybody? Welcome back. It's been a little while, but I'm back with another accessibility review. This one's going to be slightly different today as it is a preview. I was lucky enough to get hands-on with Far Cry 6 ahead of its launch on October the 6th. Far Cry is an absolute favorite of mine. I sunk so many hours into Far Cry 5 and New Dawn, so I was so excited to get this opportunity. Managed to get about 4 hours of gameplay in, so a nice big chunk to really get my hands on, explore all the accessibility. I probably won't be able to cover everything today as there is a lot, but I will do my best to cover what I can. So just a small disclaimer, as this was a preview demo, there may be things that change or become updated closer to launch, so just keep that in mind when you're watching. So the demo that I got to play was in a few different parts. First, we jumped into the first mission where the game showed us the ropes. Then we got to explore a couple of different areas to free roam and take our pick of the different quests that were around. And then we finished off the session with some co-op. So a lot to talk about, and TLDR, holy crap, you guys, I had so much fun. It was great. I did not want to stop playing when the 4 hours was up. I was super bummed that I had to stop playing and go back to work. So I could already tell that this is going to be another game that I get super into, and I want it now. I want it now. Ubisoft have been leading the way with accessibility over the last few years, and Far Cry 6 is no different. Ubisoft have very clearly used their learnings from other games and are iterating on those features with every single release, and it's really awesome to see, and it's really cool to be able to watch that progress as time goes on. Far Cry 6 does borrow a lot from its predecessor, Far Cry New Dawn, but also from recent releases like Watch Dogs Legion and Assassin's Creed Valhalla. As most of you know, I focus on cognitive accessibility in particular, as that's the area that affects me the most, and that's the area that I can speak with personal experience on. If you do want to learn more about what exactly that is, then do click here for the Cognitive Accessibility 101. There are a ton of accessibility features in this game, and covering them all would take a really long time, and unfortunately, the 4-hour demo just wasn't enough to really test out everything in any kind of depth, so I'm just going to cover cognitive accessibility today. The first thing that I want to mention are the presets. So these are groups of settings that you can enable with one click, allowing you to get into the action straight away without having to spend half an hour in the settings menus. There are presets for motion, color, cognitive, motor, hearing, and vision. And while it's probably not going to be perfect because everybody is very different, it not only makes things a lot quicker, it shows you some of the settings that you might find useful, and you might end up finding something cool that you hadn't considered before. I personally really loved the presets in The Last of Us 2, so I am also really happy to see them included here, and I think it's done really well. The cognitive preset includes things like subtitle and UI scaling, aim assists, enemy outlines, and a lot more. And there is quite a lot of overlap between the preset categories because lots of settings help different groups of people. I really like how this is structured. Now, I managed to get through Far Cry 5 and New Dawn absolutely fine without any kind of motion sickness, but I did start to get a little motion sick towards the end of my session with Far Cry 6. It seemed to be triggered by the vehicle camera rather than when I was on foot. It felt like when I was on a vehicle, field of view was quite small, it felt way too zoomed in and very bumpy, and I couldn't find any additional settings to play with. You can turn off the reticle sway, camera shakes, motion blur, and poison or drunk effects, so there are some options there to play around with, but there was just something about the vehicle camera that really set me off. Maybe when the game is out and I have more time to play around in the settings menus, I'll be able to find the exact thing I need, but it wasn't immediately apparent to me in the demo, and it was something that made me feel quite sick towards the end. However, it was a 4-hour long session, so I got through a pretty big chunk of game before I started feeling sick, which is that's not too bad. It's alright. I would definitely like some way to adjust the vehicle camera just a little bit to help alleviate those symptoms, so we will see. I have quite a lot of cognitive dysfunction due to chronic pain, or what I just like to call pain brain. So one of the most important parts of the game for me is the whole onboarding process. So how well am I taught the game? Can I pick everything up as I jump in? I have a lot of memory issues, so sometimes it takes me a little longer to learn and sort of get the hang of everything. So having a game that teaches things really thoroughly and takes me step by step is really important to me. And proper onboarding and a good tutorial is really awesome for other players too. I'm sure everyone has picked up a game, tried to get into it, and has just noped out because it's been too freaking confusing and obtuse, and the learning process has just been frustrating and not at all fun. Unfortunately, I'm not able to show any footage of the first mission, and I'm sure most of you will want to try and stay away from spoilers anyway, but I will say that I did enjoy it. I get really anxious when playing these kind of demos and preview events because I always worry that I'm going to be rushed through and I won't get a chance to pick things up properly. But the starting mission was enough for me to get to grips with the basics, and I was able to have a really good time. Further into the game, whenever you're shown any new mechanics, there are these sort of short tutorial screens that I absolutely love. The number of words is super minimal, so you're not overwhelmed with lines and lines of text, and the keywords are in yellow, which helps them stand out so you can process that information. Also, the large images help you see what they actually mean and how it might look in game. The game has two difficulty modes in Far Cry 6, Story Mode and Action Mode, which differs ever so slightly from the three difficulty tiers that you have in Far Cry 5 and New Dawn. I love that these aren't labelled easy or hard because that's subjective to the player, but they're named after the kind of experience that the player is after instead, and I think that's pretty rad. Difficulty affects how much damage the player takes and how quickly they recover health, which I believe is also how difficulty was scaled in the previous games too, and this is also explained in the menu so you know exactly what you're getting when you're trying to make that choice. The controls are more or less the same as they were in New Dawn. We'll also see the return of lefty mode as well as a new one-handed control scheme, which is super cool. I'm really excited to hear from some of my friends about how this works out for them. The game also supports extensive remapping and an absolute ton of other options that I won't be able to go into in this video, but I will link you to more info in the description if you want to hear more about those. One thing I really appreciate is that the game gives you control prompts when you start doing an activity. So for example, the button will come up when you're near a grappling hook. I appreciate this because I forget which button I'm looking for constantly, but after a few of these little button prompts, I'll be good. Similarly to Watch Dogs Legion, there are a few different control schemes that you need to remember, one for walking, one for driving, etc. But like in Legion, you can press the button to display those control schemes in-game, and I'm really happy that's been carried over to Far Cry 6 because it was super helpful in Watch Dogs Legion. I did have a little bit of trouble here and there remembering things, but I think there is definitely a bit of time pressure added at this kind of event, so I probably missed a couple of prompts, but I think when I sit down with the full game, it'll be all good. I also really appreciated the helpful hints that come up on screen when you die. There was a part where the game was like, hey, you should maybe equip some different gear to protect from fire, which I hadn't considered because I hadn't really spent a huge time in the inventory menu at that point. I was trying to, get through as much sort of gameplay as I could. So yeah, it was really helpful. I love these kind of hints. It reminded me of the ones that pop up when you die in the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes. So I really dig it. I love that kind of little, just give me a little nudge in the right direction. Tell me something that I may have missed that's going to help me a lot. Navigation in Far Cry 6 is pretty similar to the navigation in New Dawn in that there's no navigation assistance as such. There's no breadcrumb trail or arrow to follow when you're on foot, but there is when you're in a vehicle. Far Cry 6 does have a little mini-map in the bottom left this time round instead of the bar across the top that we had in 5 and New Dawn, which I like, but I did still find myself getting a little bit lost. Although that's partly because I was trying to safely climb down a mountain and totally forgot that I had a parachute and I could just throw myself off the mountain instead. So I spent a lot of time doing that by mistake. One thing they've added that's really interesting is adding these little contextual clues in the world. So there are blue flowers that line the blue trail, and there might be arrows pointed on the wall or an eye symbol that indicates you might want to look up. I thought this was really nice. I don't know if it's as useful as a breadcrumb trail for me personally, but it is a really nice design feature, and it's really interesting to kind of see how they've built that in, and it's pretty to look at too. It's really nice. Scouting ahead by using your camera is back, although this time you'll be using your new camera phone, and you can use this to tag soldiers and items in the world. When you tag them, they'll glow red, and this will also show through walls, which is really helpful. This is similar to New Dawn, although I do miss the little red markers they had over their heads in New Dawn. I did find myself finding it quite difficult to identify enemies in combat, especially when it was a bit chaotic. There is a setting where you can give enemies an outline color, which I was using, but I felt like in combat I just couldn't pick them out. It wasn't bright enough or bold enough. I was just confused. The enemies do have markers over their heads, but they're a little bit different, I guess indicating their rank or their power, but it was a little bit confusing. I probably missed out some of the explanation in that because we were playing a demo, so it was a bit confusing and I was a bit lost. Giving the enemies different markers meant that it was just a little bit confusing to pass like altogether. But maybe with the full release and being able to like go through the tutorials and go through the onboarding in a bit more depth, this will be a bit easier. We will see. I am very excited for this game, and I'm super stoked that Ubisoft are putting so much love and thought into making really nice, cool design choices that make their games accessible, and I'm definitely really interested to see where they take it in future. I am pumped for Far Cry 6. I'm gonna play the hell out of it. That's all I've got for now. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!